So what happens to a professional wrestler after their career comes to an end? Nail in the Coffin, The Fall and Rise of Vampiro is the newest wrestling documentary that is now available on streaming services and follows the life of wrestler Vampiro, whose real name is Ian Hodgkinson. And this was a screener presented to me by Epic Pictures and Dread, and when you talk about wrestling documentaries, I am all in. I am a huge wrestling fan, just to give myself a little credibility. I've been watching ever since the year 2000, which was probably one of the best years in professional wrestling. I've always been a WWE, or at least back then it was WWF guy. I hadn't really watched WCW until really like a couple of years ago when the WWE Network came out. So I've been going back and watching old WCW Nitro shows and all those pay-per-views and just seeing just how of a mess that show was, but how cool and how popular everyone was on that show. Really, if you think about it, wrestling is just a mess. You look at it now, Vince McMahon runs basically the whole thing. He has a vice grip on the entire industry, and back then, him fighting with Time Warner and Eric Bischoff, trying to beat each other in the ratings and just putting anything and everything on TV just to get more people to watch them. It's a fun business, wrestling is. And this documentary is a great look on how that industry can affect someone's life who kind of goes down not the most healthy path. And usually I would do a plot summary at this point in my reviews, but since this is a documentary, it's really no point in doing that because this is basically what it is. This is the life of Vampiro and his struggle with chronic arthritis, his struggle with drugs, apparently being involved with the mafia at one point. It's his struggle of coping with life after being active in the ring, being a professional wrestler. And the film takes place between 2017 and 2018, with the coinciding Triple Mania 25 and Triple Mania 26 from wrestling promotion AAA, which is probably the biggest wrestling organization from Mexico. And that style of wrestling focuses on the lucha libre style, which shows a lot of flips and a lot of dives and a lot of aerial maneuvers, and a lot of wrestlers wear masks for honor and for power and respect. And that's where Vampiro got his start in the wrestling business. He saw wrestling on TV one day and then went down to Mexico and said, hey, I want to be a part of this, and didn't know anything about wrestling, never wrestled before in his life. And they said, well, you're a Canadian guy with long hair, so yeah, we'll just make you the Canadian Vampiro. And he became very popular because he was a breath of fresh air. Here's someone who didn't wear masks. He looks different. He moves different. He's actually a very good-looking guy, so he's appealing to the female demographic in the audience. And he was embracing the punk rock style that was going on in the world at that time, when everyone else focused on the long history of lucha libre, and we had big muscled-up guys in the WWF, people like Hulk Hogan, Kevin Nash. Here's a guy that just looks different. And when you look different, if you have a different aesthetic from other professional wrestlers at the time that you are wrestling, you tend to get noticed a lot more than if you just fit into a nice clay mold. Now, I wasn't that familiar with Vampiro's work before this documentary. Probably what I knew him for the most was when he gave Sting a bloodbath in the middle of the ring in WCW. That was when he was embracing the misfit persona. He started painting his face, actually very similar to the way Sting started painting his face with his Crow character. People were like, oh, is he like a tag team partner of Sting? What's going on here? So that was my experience with him in the ring, but really what I know him most for, and probably what I've seen him the most with, is his commentary for Lucha Underground, which was an amazing wrestling show, and they shot it very much like a soap opera, where there was scripted dialogue, and there was beautiful cinematography. People had weird mythical powers in it. Yes, mythical powers. I loved it. And he was their colored commentator, and he'd been away from the wrestling business for a very long time, and they reached out to him because of his background with lucha libre style. He said okay, and that kind of ushered his way back into the whole wrestling profession. Except now he does all the backstage stuff, which I love when someone who performs in front of the camera ends up going behind the camera and becomes a director or a producer or a writer or a cinematographer. And needless to say, this guy's career in the wrestling business was very long. It's actually still going right now, even though it definitely shouldn't be. And this documentary shows his rise to fame and stardom, and also his struggles with painkillers, drugs, just a lot of bad shit that you're doing to your body. Hell, professional wrestling itself is not good for your body. You are slamming your entire body down on a canvas that back then probably wasn't the most forgiving as it is now, and you have just an insane work schedule where you'd be working and traveling for 300 days out of the year. And back then, when it came to professional sports, professional wrestling, when it came to injuries and concussions, your coach or whoever was employing you was basically like, well, shake it off and go out there and perform again. Not nowadays, where health of the athlete and the concussions is definitely, it's definitely more in the spotlight and more focused on, which is a very good thing. Of course, there's always room for improvement. But the wrestling world is such a strange and evil commodity because you get a spot. You get a spot on the card, you get TV time, and you want to do anything and everything to keep that spot. If you get hurt, you go off TV for several months, sometimes a year or so. And people start forgetting about you, and other wrestlers come in and they fill your spot. All of a sudden, when you're healed up and you come back, that spot is no longer there. So back then, if you got hurt, you try to keep it to yourself as much as possible. And Vampiro is definitely an example of that mentality. Reading the director's notes, I know he wanted to make this a very positive and uplifting film towards the end, but to be honest, I wasn't getting that uplifting sense. This film was actually kind of depressing because, sadly, I think that this story of a wrestler going from fame and stardom to retiring from wrestling and all of a sudden not knowing what to do with their life, so they come back to wrestling in some type of like producer-like role, and then all of a sudden he comes into the ring and takes suplexes and bumps when he shouldn't be taking those things at his age. I mean, how many times have we seen that happen over the years? Far too many. I mean, it's almost a running joke of, hey, every single month there's another famous wrestler passes away at the age of 40, at the age of 50, well before they should be, because of all the shit that they pumped into their body and all the abuse that they've taken over the years. And Vampiro's story is heading down that road. We see his desired relationship with his daughter, trying to have an active relationship with her, but you see him nowadays, and when he comes home from the road of producing matches or doing commentary, and he's walking up to his front door, he can barely walk. Man is constantly taking painkillers to hide the physical pain that he has and also to relieve the mental pain that he goes through and the anxiety and the depression that you can obviously see in this documentary. What's nice to see, though, is that at least he knows it. He's not one of those old-time wrestlers who denies being old. He recognizes it. He actually says it many, many times in this film. I'm old. I shouldn't be doing this. I actually hate the wrestling business. But he also says that terrible and sad line of, I just can't get away from it. Basically, if you've ever seen Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler, that's this movie. Actually, that film, The Wrestler, could be put into a number of professional wrestlers' lives after wrestling. I mean, you talk about drugs, you talk about steroids that all these guys used to take just non-stop, but no one ever talks about the one drug that professional wrestling gives to these athletes, and that's just the drug of the crowd reactions and performing in front of the crowd. That is the most addicting drug that all these wrestlers go through, and it's hard to get away from that and hard to say no to it. That's why some of these old-time wrestlers keep coming back. Ric Flair, he's still in the ring today when he shouldn't be. The man was in his 70s, almost died last year, and yeah, he's coming to a performance center where there's a bunch of people and this whole coronavirus pandemic thing. Yeah. It's wrestling. I gotta come back. That's Vampiro. He needs to surround himself with this. He needs that roar of the crowd and that joy he gets from listening to his entrance and listening to fan reactions and being a part of the wrestling business, even though he says out loud, I hate it. I hate people. I hate that I have to be a part of this. This documentary is definitely geared more towards wrestling fans, or at least people who are aware of the wrestling product and have a good idea and a good sense as to how the wrestling business works behind the scenes. To someone who's not involved in the wrestling community or is not a wrestling fan, I don't know how connected you will be with this story, even though it is a good solid story of a man trying to rekindle his relationship with his daughter and trying to find meaning in his life after a career, which is something that is kind of universal and all of us can relate to, at least at one point in our lives. But again, I would say that this is geared more towards the wrestling fans and the wrestling community. You get some great behind the scenes stuff though. The first 30 minutes of this documentary deals with behind the scenes of Triple Mania 25, which I was actually getting a little worried. Why are we still focusing on this event? Is this more of like a 24/7 documentary of this event other than the wrestler? Because that's kind of cool, but it's not what I signed up for. And then it finally kicks in. But you get to see a bunch of behind the scenes stuff, particularly about how much of a fuck up Jeff Jarrett is. You watch him backstage and he's purposely causing shit and causing stirrups between people. You know, when he's not selling gold bars or whatever he tried doing. But I think it's a solid documentary. I think a lot of people will enjoy it. I'm going to give Nail in the Coffin 3.5 out of 5 Blu-rays.
I am above average.
Thank you again to Epic Pictures and to Dread for giving me the screener to watch this movie and to review it. I started this channel 3 years ago and I'm getting screeners now, which is really, really cool and on a consistent basis too. So I'm living the best life. But I also take recommendations on this channel, so if any of you have recommendations of films that you want me to review on here, leave your comment below this video, or go to my Facebook page, my Instagram, or my Twitter, leave your recommendation there. If I have access to it, I will watch, review it, and give you a shout out on the channel. And if you do want to help support me and build this channel up bigger than what it's been for the last 3 years, you can make a PayPal donation on the main page of my YouTube channel. You can list your movie with your donation. Any size donation will do, and if I have access to it, I will expedite it and get your review done as quickly as possible. So guys, have you seen Nail in the Coffin? What did you think about it? Or if you've never seen it before and you stumbled across it because of this video, then comment below, let me know what you thought about it. And as always, if you like what you see here, if you like my take on movies, then hit the subscribe button. Make sure you hit that bell so you know the next time I release my next movie review. So guys, I will see you with my next movie review, but in the meantime, be well, be good to each other, and go watch a movie. Take care, guys.